Thanks for joining me again for the second half of this conversation regarding moving away from short-term or consumable preps to a system of perpetual preps. If you haven't watched part one, please click on the link up above and watch it, and then come join me here. In the meantime, I'll be off in the kitchen waiting for your return. It's currently winter here in Alaska, and the temperatures outside range from freezing to well below 0 degrees. What does this have to do with prepping? Well, how are you going to keep yourself warm in a winter power outage? Would you be able to keep just yourself warm, or would you be able to heat your home? You might be able to dress in additional layers or add additional blankets to your bed, add a hot water bottle to keep your extremities warm, or cuddle up next to a loved one, or maybe even your dog or cat, and use their body heat to help heat yours. But what about your home? Would you be able to heat your home? For me, my perpetual prep is having a wood stove. Now, I realize not everybody's going to be able to have a wood stove installed into their home, but as I mentioned, this is my perpetual prep. Currently, I am using wood that I purchased and have delivered to my property. I do have several chainsaws that I can use to harvest wood. However, my chainsaws are either reliant upon electricity to power the batteries, or they're requiring fuel to operate them. So when those things are no longer available, I do have other means of being able to go out and harvest some dead standing trees here on my property. But as I exhaust the dead standing trees, I'm going to have to go further and further out. And that means that I'm going to be needing to take on more and more calories to be able to have the energy and the strength to be able to harvest those trees and bring them back to my property. So let's move into food and how you can make some perpetual preps in your pantry. The stew meat and vegetables have been simmering away for a couple of hours now, and they're getting to the point where they're getting tender. So I'm going to go ahead and start cooking some rice. While I'm simmering the rice away here, as I went to go light the butane stove, it had actually just run out of fuel. So that just goes to show that while this butane camp stove is a great alternative to a power outage, this would be considered a short-term prep because these things don't last that long and they have to be resupplied. Where my wood stove would be a perpetual prep. However, you may not have access to install a wood stove into your home for many different reasons, but there are alternatives to either of these. For one is you could get yourself a rocket stove. I have a rocket stove, which is portable, and if I were living in an apartment or a townhome, say, I could use it out on the balcony or a patio. The one I have here is built into an ammo can. There are other versions available online that are even more lightweight and compact than this one is. As I mentioned, I could use this on a balcony or a patio, but if doing so, you want to make sure that there isn't anything directly above the rocket stove because they can produce a rather tall flame. They're called rocket stoves because they actually sound like a rocket or a jet engine when they're producing their flame, and they, do get extremely hot. So use caution, of course, when using these. A nice thing about rocket stoves, though, is that they only require small twigs or branches in order to produce that flame. You're not reliant upon having firewood or having to go out and harvest logs or dead standing trees to produce heat source for cooking over. That's better. Now that the rice is able to cook, I want to talk about short-term and perpetual preps when it comes to your food supply. It's highly recommended that everybody have a supply of food on hand in case of an emergency. Whether that's enough to carry you through a storm that might keep you homebound for a few days, or if you're like some preppers, that you're going to have decades worth of food stored in your pantry or your cellar. Every prepper and homesteader is going to recommend that you can your food. It'll have a longer shelf life. You will have food lasting for years this way. But one thing that you might not know if you're new to canning is that the lids that come with the jars that you purchase are a one-time use product. It used to be that you could reuse these lids over and over again. However, they have changed the rubber that they use for the seal, and after it's been put through a pressure canner or even a water bath canning, that lid now has an indentation on it which might not line up with the next jar that you put it on. And because these lids are made from a thin metal, they're subject to rusting. That rusting can also cause little imperfections along the seal and allow bacteria to seep in, which can cause some foodborne illnesses such as botulism, which can be deadly. Botulism has no smell or taste, and so therefore you honestly wouldn't know if you've ingested that bacteria. And so it's highly recommended that you follow the manufacturer's recommendation and only use these lids once. The fact that these are a one-time use makes these a short-term prep. Now, I do use these lids, but I only use them when I'm dry canning items. I dry can all my goods into glass jars. That's my preferred method. And because of that, I know that these lids have only been used for dry canning. What do I do when I'm going to be pressure canning or water bath canning? Well, I purchase some reusable lids. These lids are from Harvest Guard, and they are a two-piece component system. It comes with a reusable rubber ring and a reusable plastic lid. I'm not a huge fan of plastic, but there are times where you just can't really get away from it. Now, these lids and rings can be used a minimum of 10 times. And I purchased enough of these to ensure that I will never have to buy another canning lid as long as I live. So that's one way that I'm adding perpetual preps into my pantry. When it comes to your food, you will have to restock. And if you're looking to do so economically, I recommend checking out Disabled and Prepping. She has a lot of great advice on how you can do so on a limited budget. I also recommend that you check out Not So Remote Alaska. He has some fantastic advice for building up your cache of food and supplies by seeking out daily deals. And one other way that you can make this perpetual is by starting a garden. Now, I realize not everybody has access to land that they can garden on, but you might have a windowsill that you can start a small container garden in, or a balcony or a patio. If you live in an area where you don't get much sunlight, you might find that there's a community garden available to you where you can grow your own food. Another way that you can make this perpetual is by harvesting the seeds from the crops that you grow, or by purchasing seeds, so that you can not only start a garden, but that you can continue that garden going for years to come. If you're like me and you live in a cold region, then you'll want to grow some short season crops, things that can be harvested within 60 to 110 days. And if you're in an area where your hardiness zone is low on the spectrum, here I'm in a zone 2A, then you'll want to potentially avoid some perennial crops. So annual crops like peas, lettuce, carrots, potatoes, things like that might do better in your area. Another way that you can resupply your food cache is by hunting and fishing. But as Josh at Little Alaska Home Place pointed out, if you're in a situation where everybody is competing for the same resources by hunting and fishing, they might be depleting the resources in your area, or they might be pushing that game further out. And even if they're not, it's never a guarantee when you go hunting and fishing. Ask me how I know. Earlier, I mentioned about how I prefer to have reference materials available to me in the form of an actual book as opposed to being available online. And this book here is one of the books that I highly recommend. It's The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. And if you're not familiar with this book, it's going to teach you basically how to forage and then turn your foraged items into herbal remedies or treatments for ailments that you might have. And this is just one of the books that I highly recommend. I also recommend the Back to Basics book. It has a lot of survival skills in there. That is a book that I think everybody should have in their library. But I also am going to recommend some books that are a little bit on the heavier side, if you will. They're covering topics that aren't for the faint of heart, but will give you a greater perspective of what it might be like to live through a catastrophic event, whether it's a grid down situation or it's war has made it to your doorstep. The first that I recommend everybody read or have on hand really is any U.S. military survival manual. Those manuals are going to provide a wealth of information that are going to teach you a lot of things about how you can survive, through some pretty tough situations. And speaking about surviving through tough situations, one of the books that I recommend is The Dark Secrets of STHF Survival, and that is by Selko Bekovic, and he actually lived through the Baltic War, and he wrote a book about his experience over the course of a year with war being fought right outside his door. And that book, like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of atrocities that he mentions in the book, but it will give you a firsthand retelling of experiences of what it's like to live, with no power, no food available, no water, and the realities of war from a civilian standpoint. So, in addition to that, I also recommend a fictional book, and that book is 1 Second After. It is a fictional book, but it will cover. It's a book that a lot of people recommend because while it's fictional, it does a really good job of outlining what humanity is going to do during a catastrophic grid down situation. In addition to that, then I also recommend a book called Strategic Relocation, because if you are thinking that you're going to bug out in a grid down situation or a catastrophic event, this book can help you to understand some of the realities of doing so, and will also give you some statistical information about some of the areas where you might be thinking about relocating to in a bug out situation. And speaking of bugging out, I have to tell you that I, for one, am never going to bug out. That's why I live here where I do. But if you're going to bug out, you might want to consider getting some paper maps, because if the grid goes down or you fail to turn on your navigational devices before losing internet signal because you've gone so far out into the boonies, if you will, you're going to find that you might be lost. So I do recommend keeping some pretty good maps, whether it's a full road atlas or just a map of your state or neighboring states, in your vehicle at all times, and updating those periodically, because the roads do get rebuilt and moved over time. But I would say, every 5 to 10 years you should have to replace your maps, but not more frequently than that. These are all just things to, again, take into consideration. One of the best things that any of us can do for perpetuating our own health is to take better care of ourselves. And that goes for you, John. So please drink some fluids, get some rest, and eat something more than fish sticks. All kidding aside, I hope you get well soon. The rice is just about done cooking, and so I'm going to turn my beef soup into beef curry. And I'm just using a store-bought Japanese curry mix. This one happens to be hot, but they also have them available in mild. And it literally comes in a brick like this. And I'm just going to throw the entire brick into my pot here. And that's going to dissolve into the liquid and turn it thick like a stew. And this is very much like a stew in the fact that it's got carrots and potatoes, the beef and onions. But I wouldn't necessarily turn stew into curry because I don't necessarily think the flavors of the celery and tomatoes or the herbs that go into stew would lend themselves very well to this dish. But you could start out with the same base ingredients, again, your root vegetables and beef. And then you could add things like diced apples or a Japanese pumpkin or even edamame to this. And like I said, once this thickens up, I'm going to serve it over that rice. And it's a very comforting meal because it's got that little bit of spice to it. Even if you get the mild, it's got a nice, decent flavor to it. You'll find that it's very warming as you eat it. So not only is it going to warm you because it's a nice hot meal, but the spices are going to help warm you as well. So for a cold winter day like today, this is a perfect meal. Did you know that at the end of all of my videos, I put outtakes in? If you've made it this far into the video, I'm pretty sure you'd enjoy those outtakes. So while you enjoy those, I'm going to enjoy the plate of curry that I've dished up. And I thank you for watching today. Hopefully you remember to give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do that as well. And be sure to check out some of the videos that I've linked at the end. Until next time, please stay safe and take care. I gotta quit eating cranberries. Right? Over the past few years, as rooting and lighting, new words. Someday I'll publish my dictionary. I don't have a mixer or a blender or even a dishwasher. I'm the dishwasher. And therefore, if the dishwasher is broke, that means that I'm broke. And yeah, that's not what I'm going to say either, is it, Nikki? We don't know what we're saying, do we? We do, but we don't. We don't know how to put them into words. Oh. What are you doing? You keep interrupting. You keep interrupting me. Say hello. Say hello to all your fans. Say hello. Don't you love when you lose your train of thought? I do. I love starting over 100 million times while filming a video. Okay, I really need you to go lay down. I really need you to go lay down. I'm trying to do this and I can't do it when I'm focused on you because you're so cute. You're so cute. Are you cute? You are? Are you just the cutest? Oh, Nikki, I need you to go lay down. You know, I can't film with you doing this because you're too cute. How am I supposed to focus on the camera when you're right here? You're too cute. Hi, everybody. If this doesn't show you how tiny I am or how big he is, I don't know what would. Say hi. Such a big boy. You're such a big boy, but you're not a lap dog. Do you know this? You're not. You're not a lap dog. You're too big. When I say that Kenai is a mooch, I mean Kenai's a mooch. What are you still doing here? Oh, you stuck around for the outtakes? If you stuck around this far, let me know in the comments below. I'd really appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, let me know if you're going to try this curry too. Well, not this. I'm eating this. But hopefully you'll try making some yourself. Toodaloo. Delicious.